Okay. We'll call to order the Project Review Board meeting for May 15, 2024. Evening, everybody. We're all here except Lynn, so we have a quorum, and waiting for Lynn Hamlin to
Can you turn on your mic?
go on through Zoom. Mic's on, sorry, and cell phone's off. We have 8 items tonight. One is a concept review for site plan and subdivision for a 42-unit affordable or senior housing development, and then 7 applications for shoreland stabilization. And before we start here, before we ask you to do your introduction, I just want to share with the board, I was at another town's planning board meeting last week where they handled all the non-controversial items in one consent agenda item, which would probably be 7 out of 8 for us tonight. And so if anyone has any thoughts, pro or con, just please share them with Caroline or me, but we're looking into how to do that within the rules that we have.
So would that be a way to, because I was going to ask about the ones that I think you're referring to, that we talked about a couple meetings ago about staff review. And it was, I think you said that, no, we would have to get a waiver from the state.
So we have talked about working with DEP. It's not something they're open to in the past, but I think we're seeing such an increase, and now that we've cleaned our ordinances up and can go jump back to process in place, and Ford has helped craft an email, so we are going to work with DEP to see if that's an avenue. They have said no in the past, but why not ask again? So that would be an option two. That would be option 1, but option 2, I think, could go beyond that and address applications like this, or applications that might be straightforward if they come to you, but they're large enough, so it probably warrants giving the opportunity for a public process, beyond staff approval or town planner approval. So there could be kind of that middle category.
How would the consent agenda work? Would there be a document prior to the meeting that's inclusive of all these items?
Yeah, like when the council does it, they have like a packet. It's just all on an agenda, and they kind of adopted it in entirety, but if there's an issue with one of them, they would pull it out and take action on it separately. I haven't seen it done in a project review board, but I have heard from Ford and others that Falmouth has something similar, so we can look into it and see.
The way Falmouth did it was there are still items that are reviewed only at staff level. None of that definition changes, but items that have to come before the project review board, the town planner sets them up, identifies them in advance as all being for theoretically called administrative approval. You know what all 7 items are, and you start the meeting. Anyone on the board can make a request to pull it out and treat it separately, and then it happens without a vote.
So in this case, the shoreline stabilization would be an example of that.
I would be proposing to handle them as one item, right?
Would each of these individual requests have a motion?
Not if you do a consent, which is why I'm not sure how they were doing it there, but typically a consent doesn't.
But they would have individualized conditions attached to the approval.
Okay, that's what I was trying to
Yeah, it
get
would be
at.
just like we had gone through them, but they get approved as one. So it's something to think about. And
Makes good sense.
Yeah.
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 I think we just need to verify that we can, in fact, incorporate different conditions with reference to, the staff report in one action.
yeah, I grilled Falmouth on it because I liked the procedure, and the town planner explained it to me that they could, and I saw it happen, but we'll see what we come up with.
When the council does consent agenda, they have it on their minutes delineated, so I would assume that would be the method. It wouldn't just be, approvals.
Yeah, there's
Like you
acknowledgement.
said, it would have to have each one separated out on the consent agenda.
You guys are different where you do have to make legal findings on every project, so I don't know that it can be, or how that would work, but we can pursue the question, see if there's a way to do it. The timing's good to ask because we're going to make the ordinance amendments anyways to go digital. So if there's something we can tweak that you want to tweak, let's just do it all at one time.
Okay. Can you give us our informational exchange?
Sure. So first off, you guys had approved a plan for the Harris Secret Ridge subdivision a couple months back. They had to take the Mylar and modify it to put all the conditions on it. and there were a couple missing names. So they had done that. They didn't have a surveyor stamp on it last month, so you guys couldn't sign it, but we have those Mylars here for you to sign tonight. Again, the only change is the condition, and they had a couple notes that they had to clean up for accuracy. I think Todd recused or didn't approve, so you wouldn't sign it, but everyone else that took action and approved that 80 units would sign the plan. I can pull the minutes up at the end if we need to, but if everyone can make sure they do that before they leave, because they have to record that within 90 days of your action, or it all becomes null and void, and they're getting close to that deadline. The planning board continues to be busy working on the comprehensive plan. One of the things, they're talking about a couple things. The council gave directive for them to make some amendments to temporary allow a food truck park, which they made recommendations for those amendments, and so that's happening. It would allow food truck parks as an accessory use once a year and somewhat of a temporary nature. The planning board is also at council request looking at provisions we have in the ordinance about how you have to handle minimum lot size and frontage when lots are divided by zoning districts. Right now, our ordinance says that if you create a lot in multiple districts, the portion of each district has to meet the space and bulk standards regardless of how much of your parcel's in the second district. So if you have a 20-acre parcel and it has a teeny tiny corner of RR1, you can't cut that off into a new parcel because you'd have to meet the 2.5 acres and the 200 feet of frontage. So they're looking at some standards there. And then they're looking at some standards about multifamily and making a finding which would allow it to just go through site plan, not subdivision, which we'll talk about later on tonight's agenda. Design review ordinance update RFP. We got one response from North Star Planning. We are going to go ahead and interview that. We've reached out to chairs and vice chairs of all committees. In this case, Ford's going to do it. Todd had a conflict, so we went to the second longest running member, and that's Jason. So Jason's going to participate in that interview process. Jason goes way back. He was on the board years ago.
He was on.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yep, Jason left and came back. We got him back. Look out, guys. When you think you're done, we can get you back. So we have a team of 2 counselors, staff, 2 planning board, and 2 project review board members. We're going to do that interview on Tuesday. So by the next meeting, we'll have an update, whether it be we chose a consultant or have next steps. We continue to work on the comprehensive plan. A couple important things. If you haven't been to the website already, futurefreeport.com, there's a survey up there. We're going to be using the survey results to create a community vision, so we hope everybody will take that survey. If you prefer paper, there's a display table and paper copies out in the hallway. Maybe take you 5 minutes. It's open-ended. It's just a Google form. It's really easy, short answers. If you want to see the initial results of the survey and a preview of what the data collection has showed us about Freeport, we invite you all to attend our first community workshop on June 12th at the Freeport Community Center. We know it's a busy time of year and not everyone can come, but we felt it was really important to get this first discussion going before the peak of summer. So it will be recorded. So you can watch it even if you can't make it in person to see what that data is. And we'll leave the survey open a little bit past then. So again, encourage everyone to take the survey. As soon as the draft data chapters are done, we are going to be reaching out to board and committees to encourage them to participate in those 2 events. And then we will also be sending along some draft chapters to have boards take a look at and weigh in. Sorry, I'm just looking for.
Lynn's on, she's on Zoom. She just emailed me.
I am not seeing Lynn.
She says she's waiting to be invited.
Yeah, I'm not seeing Lynn. Could you let her know? Okay, sorry about that. And then I have 3 requests for temporary activity permit. On US Route 1 South, right on the right-hand side on 295, right before you get to, between a couple of the hotels, there's a vacant lot. It's dirt, it's been cleared, and they had a fill permit years ago. It had a site plan approval that they never built, but it's relatively flat. So a temporary activity permit has been issued for 21 days for Shaw Brothers. They want to use that as a laydown area for some nearby road work that they're doing. And so they want a temporary activity permit to continue using that as the construction laydown area through November. So they have made that request to the code enforcement department. Again, temporary activity needs to come for you, the code officer reviews it. If he doesn't see any issues and it would otherwise fit into zoning, we mention it to you to see if there's objections or if there's concurrence from the board. If the board concurs, then he goes ahead and issues that.
Is there any opportunity to put some sort of fencing around it if it's going to be a construction staging site?
I don't know that we have the ability to require conditions. I can make the suggestion, though, if you want, and see
Yeah,
if that's
because
something they're
I mean,
willing.
if you're driving up Route 1
do.
or down Route 1, it's
Yeah,
going to be right in your face.
I don't know if it'll make it hard to get equipment and material
Well, just, I mean,
Yeah.
around the perimeter,
in and out of there.
yeah,
Yep, I can make the suggestion,
even
though.
partial.
Okay.
Will they bring this site back to some sort of natural
It's
state?
just gravel and dirt now, so I think they're just laying stuff and then leaving, is my understanding.
Yeah, I think that would be unfortunate if they just, because it had some growth to it and it
Yeah.
looked sort of natural and blended in. and
I'm
if it
not
just
aware of
looked like a
any, like,
leftover-
revegetation, because it would have just been growth that occurred after they filled it. They had approval to gravel it years ago. That's not part of the plan that I'm aware of. Again, it was approved to be filled with no vegetation, so,
And that still stands forever.
well, that's what they had approval for. It's just been so long, so it's
Yeah.
grown in, but it's not like an approved landscaping plan or anything that we're looking at. It's just natural growth over time. I can get more information on it if there's concerns by the board. But it's not really the level of detail that we've gotten into in the past. Especially in a case where they're not technically making any changes of previously approved site improvements.
So was it a site plan review and a project that never happened?
So
that
they
cleared it?
got site plan review in like the early 2000s. They were going to put a medical office building in there, and they never did. And so at the time, they thought it'd be more marketable if they cut down all the trees, filled it in, and made it flat. And so they had approval just to fill it and just have it be dirt and gravel. And so it's just sat there. They haven't sold it, and they never came back for
Right.
site plan beyond the fill permit. Okay, when the
Are you looking for a response from us? or-
We just kind of bring it to you for concurrence. That's nothing with a real process. I think more so you're aware, because a lot of times these are things that have come through site plan review. They need to do something temporary that will go away eventually. And so the way that we've been handled that in Freeport is a temporary activity. There was one time that you guys had concerns. There was, I don't know, if any of you were on the board, maybe Todd or maybe Jason back then, but there was a site we approved and they kept parking cars in a place that wasn't approved, and they kept coming back like every 6 months. And finally the board was like, look, we talked about this, this isn't what you had approval for, you need to like make other plans. And so then it stopped, but otherwise it's not really something the board's usually concurred. And again, these have been reviewed by the code officer for safety, accessibility, access, all that. The second,
Sorry, just before we leave
Yeah,
that,
sure.
there's two members who I think are a little concerned about what it might look like during and then afterwards.
okay,
So perhaps share that.
yeah, so, I mean, do you guys, I guess, want to note that as an objection to the temporary activity being issued, or you'd more, hey,
Not-
pass
not
along the
necessarily.
concern
Yeah.
of the appearance? Okay, so the fencing and concern that any growth is going to get trampled, essentially.
Or if they're going to leave an
That's been there.
eyesore, they're just kind of like,
Yep.
Yeah, I'd share that.
Yeah, I don't know that we can really make them revegetate. Yeah, it's kind of awkward situation, because again, it's not a landscaping plan, it's just whatever's grown up over time.
Right.
Yeah, okay, I'll pass along the concerns on that one.
Thank
The next one is a request from the Greater Freeport Chamber of Commerce on town property. This is for the skate park that's gone up the past couple years behind the hose tower down on Depot Street. And this would be through, it's been issued for 21 days, but they're looking for approval to have this one put up through October.
The skate park itself, or
Yeah, this is like where it's a parking lot and they have like some ramps and little,
isn't it always there?
no, it comes down in the off-season. They apply for a temporary activity to put it up every year. Yep. Nope, not always there. And actually, I was just informed that they did tell The last one, they need to loam and seed the site when they're done there. The laydown area for construction, sorry.
Yeah.
Breaking news on that one. And then the third one I have is for LOB. This is kind of a unique one. As you know, you have done a lot of approvals recently for alterations to the flagship store, and so they're going to be shutting down a majority of the flagship store. Some of it's already shut now. They're going to keep open the hunt fish portion. They have the home store, they have the outlet and the other stores, but most of the flagship store is going to be closed. So they are looking for a temporary activity permit to put up a big tent, which they will temporarily relocate the retail store in. So if you are familiar with LO Bean, the main street's kind of right over here. You have the flagship store, and then there's a parking lot on the corner of Nathan I and Justin. They have a lot of accessible parking in there. So they are proposing to take that entire parking lot, put a tent on it because it works with the grade. They would relocate all the accessible parking over behind the Hunt Fish store where they have an accessible ramp in the shortest route to the facility. And they would need to leave the tent in place for 20 months. This one will alter approved landscaping plan. So what they have submitted is a plan. This one has some drawings of what the tent is. They've done some work with neighbors, but it's a fancy tent. It will have HVAC, it will have bathrooms. So they will have to take down some of the vegetation, but they have a replanting plan to replant the same species at the end of the project. At the end of the 20 months, the tent will go away, they'll do the plantings, and it will open back up as a parking lot.
Does this come to us as a temporary because the structure itself is not a permanent structure?
And the use is temporary, so this one is
Even
a.
though temporary for 20 months
We
is-
don't have a definition of time. It is a long time, but it's going to go away and get restored back to its previously approved site plan conditions.
I recall we've had other matters where, I think where the code officer referenced the 1 year point as the difference between temporary and something that requires site plan review. And maybe the broader question is, why wasn't this part of this detailed consideration that we did on this project, which includes consideration of phasing issues?
Because this is seen as something being temporary in nature and it's being handled separately. I mean, it's related, but handled independently. And at the end of the day, it's not a permanent change to their site plan. They're going to restore what was previously approved.
What's the time frame?
The time,
Time to start?
the time frame on this one will go up in January of 2025, and it will come down November 1st, 2026. 20 months is what they need for the tent. And it's big enough that they, even though it's temporary, they would get a building permit that notes that it is there temporarily and that they have to restore. So this one I have drawings, if you guys want me to pass this down. It's a large tent. But so let me pass these down so you guys can look at these.
As I understand, our rules required the landowner to come and present us plans of what a food cart that's there for a couple of months a year is going to look like.
They do.
And a 20-month tent is outside of that scope?
We don't have a timeline for the temporary activity permit. We haven't seen them this long. We've seen people come every year and renew it or renew them back to back. In this case, there's such an upfront cost to doing this. If they don't do this, we won't have a flagship store for
So
the
why
time.
wouldn't this be part of their site plan?
Because it's a temporary change to the site during construction, and it's going to revert back to the previously approved site plan. Yeah, they have to come to PRB because it's more than 21 days. So they submit this, they submit the plan, they show where they're going to put the accessible parking.
How many square feet is this?
I'm not sure, I can look at the drawings when you're done. I think it's displacing,
Does
oh,
it
like
have
80
text
spots.
anywhere else?
Let me look and see if we have a square foot.
Linda's on, trying to get on, by the way. She says she's on channel 3.
I still am not seeing Lynn.
Maybe it is.
She can do it via the,
The agenda.
Yeah.
The link's right. I'm gonna.
on the town website.
Yep. I'll try to send her. a link.
It's hard to read the little print.
Hundred and 48 feet by 118 feet.
Did you find the square footage on there?
548.
248 feet by 118 feet, looks like.
Yeah, it's taking up the entire parking lot.
Half an acre.
Yeah, over half an acre.
Yeah, it's the entire parking lot.
I don't know.
Can't this be on the agenda item next month, the plan anyway?
I mean, we don't, so temporary structures like this, we don't usually have come through. They'd have to meet design review and site plan review for you guys to review it as a permanent structure. If they come through site plan review, it's typically like a permanent
They-
approval.
I mean, they're going to be tearing up pavement or something. It's not just going to sit all on the surface,
Nope,
is
they're
it?
they're keeping the pavement there. They have to put some temporary alterations to flatten it in spots, but I was understanding they wouldn't need to dig up the pavement. They're able to put something under it to make it have a flat foundation.
But if it were,
They need to take up some of the they need to take
Yeah.
down trees, in vegetation.
but if they were to phase construction, to move something over here, okay, to build something, and then while they could do this, and then move back, and they're going to take that down, that structure would have to come before us, right? So why is this different than that? This is the same sort of thing, isn't it?
They would come to you if they were going to seek permanent approval to keep it there. In this case, at the end of this, it's going to go away, so they're not coming through site plan and design review. I can't think of are you saying someone would build
They're
something?
going to build a temporary store, okay, post and beam, whatever, okay? And that was going to be temporary, but they were going to be tearing it down at the end and move back into the other one, or they were going to relocate it. They would have to have a permit for that. But it still doesn't, this seems very vast.
I mean,
for-
I can't think of a
In
time.
20 months
I
seems
can't
very
think of a
long.
time, like, people put up temporary construction offices all the time, and those don't come to you. Those are exempt under the ordinance. We didn't feel like this felt like a temporary construction trailer or construction building. Yeah, I can't think of a time where anyone's built a temporary stick build towards building a permanent structure, Todd, like you're giving an example. I think if the board has concerns, we can revisit, we can note that you don't concur. If you guys need additional information or you questioned how it's being handled, then we can get additional.
Well, I'm not sure what the
Guidance.
concerns might be, other than this is the process, I guess.
Just wanted to, the note on this says approved, but here, our approval is needed for more than 21 days.
Any temporary activity, the code officer can only approve it for 21 days. It says anything longer has to come to project review for concurrence. It doesn't give you any standard or anything beyond that. So he'll look at it for safety, accessibility. We need to actually now they can displace parking. The parking's not an issue because they have hundreds of surplus parking spaces.
Don't we think they're coming they're on our agenda next month anyway, right?
But by coming through this, they're not going through formal site plan and design review.
No, but if concurrence is required for more than 21 days, that doesn't mean that that we have to review it as a site plan.
You don't review it as a site plan. It's different. It's its own category in the ordinance.
Right, but if they're going to be on the agenda and we don't need this until January, couldn't we just defer this and take it up as an agenda item and issue our approval after we get some information?
I don't know if you guys can take it up as an agenda item, but I think if you guys have concerns about concurring for this structure under temporary activity and you'd rather table it, we can get some additional legal guidance. I don't really see you, I don't know how you would get this through design review. That would be a question I would have. And then secondly, you don't usually grant site plan approval for temporary structures. Like, you grant that and then they go on their way. And if they start it within, that year, they
Just-
can keep it there.
I'm not troubled by it, but there are a couple board members who are. Why couldn't we have it on the agenda for concurrence, not as a site plan review?
So I guess if you want to put it on for concurrence, what other information do you need? Like, when we do stuff for concurrence, we don't put it on there as an advertised agenda item because you're not taking a formal action and you're not making findings. It's this very
Is there other,
vague
I'm sorry to interrupt.
standard under temporary activity.
Is there other information that would make you feel more comfortable?
I would like to know what is the definition, get clarification on definition of temporary,
Okay.
okay? And also, too, I'd be interested in learning more about how is this anchored?
Yeah, so they'll have to get a,
So, I
they
mean,
will
so
get a
what sort of
building
details
permit.
are there? How is it anchored?
Okay.
There's clearly a deck on the floor that's level,
Mm-hmm.
above grade. How is, it just, I don't know, it doesn't seem like it'd just be sitting on the surface of the parking lot.
And they are going to apply for a building permit, so we could get those questions answered for you.
As-
Does look like it's on a raised bed in the pictures.
Yeah, I think they're like that. They're taking over their vegetation, putting a platform over the islands, but they looked at many parking lots, and this one's that has the best grade to make this work. And so they don't need it till January, but this is like a massive PGA golf tent, which is why they are here before you so far in advance, because the lead time they would need for this and the
just-
cost.
Sorry, Jim.
I think we also want detailed confirmation about the effect on parking. How many parking spaces are being taken out of service?
So they have about 400 surplus parking spaces. I think this would take about 100.
Right, so it would be helpful to get those numbers kind of
Okay.
in writing rather than
Yep.
generalized.
Okay, so you'd like,
Traffic patterns, I mean, obviously, they're going to have to recirculate some of the traffic around there.
yeah, so the lot will be shut off, but the other circulation will be maintained around it.
It looks like it's right on
It's on
one
the
of those roads.
Corner of
so-
Cross and Justin's.
So there'll have to be some other protective, to me, something that protects the cars, the people coming and crossing. It's we had large open areas for pedestrian access and all.
I
It
don't
seems-
believe they're interfering with any site walks, but we can get a bigger copy of the site plan so you can see how it's working with the site walks there. Todd wants some more information on the structural integrity of the structure.
Well,
And I was just going to add, just in general, what are the health and safety implications of this? So building on
Hurricane.
pedestrian flow, but emergency access, all those kind of things that
So the temporary activities, the code officer reviews them and he reviews them with public safety officials.
so just going back to the temporary,
Hurricane.
definition of temporary, it says here on the application, a temporary activity permit may be requested for an activity that is of decidedly temporary nature or of short-term duration, which will, because of unusual circumstances, be unable to meet the minimum requirements of the ordinance. What is short-term? Where,
We don't define that.
I-
Yeah.
yeah, in 20 months.
We
just-
don't define it. I think it was more looked at, I don't know how you would get a tent through design review and knowing that they don't need this to stay here permanently. It was going to be temporary in nature. They were going to restore the site. So this seems like an avenue they could.
I mean, is there a
I
way
think they're on
to
the agenda for next month, right?
limit this in terms of that duration? Like,
You what?
is there a way to limit this in terms of that duration? If they say it's going to be to the date that they're saying, can we hold them to that and not?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the
drag out
permit would only
forever?
be issued for the dates shown on here.
So, but then they could come back and say, we've got whatever, construction complexity that we didn't anticipate, and it's going to be another 6, 8 months or something. And
They could, but they'd have to meet whatever standards are in place at that time. So if this wasn't something that would be permitted, they could be out of luck.
I mean, it just doesn't seem like short duration.
Yeah, I know, it's a
sticking point.
It's a long temporary nature. Okay, so I just want to review.
So procedurally, this would be tabled for consideration for concurrence.
Well, you guys don't take action on it, so I'll just take your comments and it will come back to you next month. So parking, Todd would like clarity on the definition of temporary. Todd, what do you want for something on the structure?
How is it going to be anchored? I know
Okay.
from large structures like that, the wind can hit them and tents have the
And
ability to fly
so
away.
we don't usually get into the codes. We usually leave that up to the code officer. So are you looking for something from the code officer or what are you looking for?
I think that can also get to whether it's how permanent or temporary it is. If it's
Okay.
sitting on top of the ground, that would mean that it's more temporary as opposed if they're putting in some footings, temporary footings, then to me that would indicate that it's not so temporary.
Okay, so it's not really like of course, we all care about codes and safety, but it's more the structural nature.
Yeah, and I'm also
Okay.
thinking too that, so we have this before us and we don't really define what temporary is. And we don't have we don't put any parameters on how big it could be. So what's to say down the road, somebody else could come in with a bigger thing and propose a 4-rink skating rink that's all temporary for, 2 years. And it's sitting on the ground. So what is temporary?
Okay,
So
yeah,
I think this is an opportunity for us to define this so we're not setting precedent.
I don't think we have a definition of temporary, so I think that's going to be a challenge. But I can get you the anchoring information. I can get a bigger version of the site plan so you can see how it's interacting with the current and previously approved circulation. I feel like I'm missing something.
Parking,
The parking, yep, I have parking.
Caroline, could I also flag, I think there might be a different avenue under 502, which is for temporary structures, which seems to speak to some of these issues.
We looked at we did look at 502, but we can take, here, let me pull up 502.
What are you referring to, Jen?
Yeah.
502 essentially allows for a temporary structure so long as construction activity is actively happening, and it's issued by the code officer, doesn't need us at all, and it's issued on a 6-month basis, and it gets renewed every 6 months.
Is that for construction?
That's for structures used in conjunction with construction work being performed, which this seems to fit with. In other words, and that arrangement avoids the concern that this becomes like a back channel to do something, independent of some development
Which
project.
I think kind of gets back to one of your first points is, they knew they're going to have to do something, why wasn't this part of the,
But I think it also addresses the point that you just
Right.
raised about how do we prevent this from
Right.
being the vehicle to say, oh, we're
Right.
going to have a 2-year skating
Sure.
rink.
And I will say, they've been exploring a whole bunch of options of what they're going to do when they essentially shut down the flagship store. Okay, so looking at the avenue of 502, yep. So you like the idea of looking at this, because it is associated construction, that's why they want this structure here, which would also avoid the future concern of someone wanting to come put 4 skate rinks in for 2 years that are not associated with construction. Okay, I will take all that feedback,
I have a
back with
question,
an update, sure.
a conceptual question.
Okay.
When you say that we are giving concurrence, does that mean we only have one option? We can only concur, we cannot say we're not going to agree? Concurrence means give your yes,
Yeah, you either concur or you don't,
but I mean, we don't have an option to not concur if the thing is coming in front of us for concurrence.
yeah, I think you.
Maybe
I
we
think
can
you
say
could
in.
not concur.
Well, what about if you're putting it on the agenda for possible concurrence? I just think we need to still have our options here.
If we don't concur, I think it has a 21-day life, is that right?
Yeah, yep.
Okay.
Okay, so this one you want to see back. I will just need to make sure I get that application packet back.
And I would like to get another thing answered, maybe,
Sure.
I don't know from who, maybe you know this. Were they going to be doing any other major demolition of the external buildings other than the one they say they're taking down? Because they've already been shutting down internal pieces of the store and redoing them, so I'm
So
not
they have the
clear.
approvals that you guys already granted.
Right.
Which was taking down a portion of the building.
Right, I'm not saying they shouldn't be doing that, I'm just saying the fact that they want to shut down the whole building and do all this work that we're giving them approval for, or have given them approval for, why now do they need to, like, empty it out? They've been doing everything piecemeal at a time. Was there a reason they couldn't continue doing piecemeal and just like they've been doing?
Yeah, I don't know, I don't really get into the details of their operations and why they're shutting it down. I don't know.
It's not our department.
Yeah, it's beyond our scope.
It's kind of like we don't have, this is not our department either, if we have to approve it.
So we'll take another look at it. If it seems like it can fit in under 502, then I would come back to you guys and let you know that. Otherwise, I'll get the information you requested under temporary activity, and we'll bring that back.
So your brief introductory comments have concluded?
That's my brief.
42 minutes into the meeting.
5 minutes later.
Yeah.
Item 2, review and approval of the April 17 minutes of our meeting. We've received them. Anyone have any additions or deletions to suggest? Is there a motion to accept them as presented?
So moved.
Second?
And do we have Lynn on board now?
Oh, sorry.
She says she's on.
We now have Lynn on board. Sharon, you want to note that Lynn joined?
So we have to do a roll call vote. Is that right?
We sure do.
Okay. All in favor of approving the minutes of the April 17 meeting as presented? Berger.
Yes?
Donahue.
Yes.
Hamlin.
Yes.
Hi, Lynn. Madeira.
Aye.
Yes.
Monteleone.
Yes.
Reiki, yes. Yankee?
Abstain, I wasn't there.
Okay. Approved, thank you. First agenda item is Tim Gooch Senior Housing, 42 units approved for Varney Road. And this is concept review, first appearance.
Sure, first appearance. So a couple things to be aware of. So this parcel is in the Commercial 3 District. It is a portion of a much larger parcel. So if you're coming out of the Freeport Crossing Plaza or coming through the lights off of Desert Road, kind of where the town has that temporary banner holder, you see the woods. A lot of that land is part of this parcel, but the applicant has under contract a 9-acre chunk that abuts Varney Road, not the US Route 1 side, which is why it has a Varney Road address. I got asked that question. The parcel is this proposed parcel is partially in Commercial 3 and partially in rural residential. Commercial 3 allows multifamily, and they allow the new use of affordable housing development. Rural residential 1 does not. So they are presenting plans with a net residential acreage calculation for the Commercial 3 portion in a use proposed in the Commercial 3 portion. Basically, the RR1 land is just going to sit there as excess land because it's part of what they're getting. Affordable housing developments are a new use for Freeport, and in the state of Maine, it's a result of the state's LD 2003 changes in the way Freeport implemented them. So the very short Cliff Note version for our board members is, in the case of a subdivision, which multifamily currently has to go through in Freeport, you calculate your net residential density, you get the number of units. If you can meet certain standards under the affordable housing development section of the ordinance, I think it's 535 or 536, either one of those two, you get a density bonus of 2.5. So you take the number of units times 2.5, which is how they got to 42.3. Looking over their net residential acreage calculation, it looks like they actually deducted a little more than they needed to, so they could actually get more units. But the plan here is for 42 units in one building. They would have a driveway and parking area coming off Varney Road. They did submit a site analysis plan, which I'm sure Jim will go into There are some environmental constraints on the site, wetlands, steep slopes, current easements, some old easements, and I think some unique access points. This isn't a commercial district. There are some other standards such as landscaping that would come into play. It would also be subject to Section 527, the performance standards for commercial districts. This parcel used to be partially in design review. It is no longer. There are some building design guidance in that Section 527 of the ordinance. So I think it's a good opportunity to have Jim introduce the plan to you, to see if you guys have any initial reaction on the site layout or the building design, and to talk about if you want to set a site walk. One other thing I just want to note, in the application it said they need a waiver. They actually wouldn't need a waiver here because in the commercial districts, the parking determination is determined by the board based upon a parking analysis submitted by the applicant. So you'd get that information as the project moves forward. And so the team is here to present the plans to you.
Is this mic? Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Matt Peters. I'm the Executive Director of the Freeport Housing Trust. We're one of the co-developers for the development. The other developer, Tim Gooch, had tried to be here. He got stuck traveling, unfortunately. So I think he's laying over in Baltimore or something frustrating. I also, as part of the team, I have Jim Coffin here as well, and he'll present the more particulars that you'll, I'm sure, be interested in. I just want to say quickly that the trust is excited to have a building in front of you all tonight, and we're really excited to implement the new zoning regulations that were adopted in the state legislature a few years ago and integrated into the ordinance recently by the town. So we're looking forward to seeing how that all goes and being able to add some more affordable housing to Freeport. Thanks.
Good evening, Jim Coffin, Coffin Engineering. Well, thank you. To my right, and let me move that for you. Thank you. This is our site plan, conceptual site plan for the project. This same building was done in Augusta, on Civic Center Drive, across from the UMA entrance. The only difference was in Augusta, we had a sloped roof. Same 42 units. There's a waiting list of 100 people right now trying to get into that building, which speaks volumes for what that building looks like. The reason we're not going the slope roof here is your height restriction of 35 feet. And I'm not sure that's a dead horse yet as far as the 35-foot height restriction. The architects from WBC are dealing with that right now. The lot is 9.23 acres. Concord Gully Stream. Can you hear me with this? Is that on? All right, thank you. So Concord Gully Stream right here is a demising line between the R1 district and the C3 district. As Caroline mentioned, all this is in the R1, which is pretty much useless to our project. So all our design studies come from Concord Gully Stream to the west, if you will. Right here we have Varney Road, and over here we have Route 1. Our entrance is right off from what's known as there's a sewer easement that goes right through the whole lot, and that's where we're coming in. There's also two NET easements that have been vacated. One of them is right here, and another one is right here. So this building has to be pigeonholed between the setbacks, these easements, because we certainly can't put the building over the sewer easement. I think I can give you a cleaner picture of that. Hang on just a minute. Yeah, this is the one I want. So this is our site inventory plan. The NET easement here and the other one's here. This is an old NET building, if you will. It's a block building still standing today. I don't think there's any any chance that's going to be developed anytime soon. And the sewer easement comes right through here. So if you look, here is our really only spot we can put this building. The rationale behind that is we have all these wetlands down here. We have stream setbacks to it here too. And it's just a high ground for us. That being said, I want to go back to the site plan real quick. Along the property line between us and the brewery, there's a large amount of big trees, if you will. We really want to try and save some of these trees, but at the same time, we want to make sure the fire department has access here. And in Augusta, we have to leave 20 feet so they can put the ladders up against the building. I haven't talked to the fire chief. I sent him a letter, but I haven't spoken to him out loud to see if we could reduce that area. If they just have to bring the hoses in there, it's 3 stories. And that way we might have a better chance of saving some of those trees. We certainly don't want to put a retaining wall there if we don't have to. That being said, our entrance, once again, through here, 43 parking stalls. We have a dumpster here. We have EV parking, and we have handicap parking, picnic tables, as I mentioned, the dumpster. And then we have a sidewalk that we've sent out to Varney Road in hopes that one day that Varney Road entrance will connect to Route 1. So our utility plan, we have a series of catch basins in here. All these catch basins come together and they drain to our under-drain soil filter, which is a pond, if you will. I'm sure you've seen these on other projects in town with a soil filter beneath it with the pipes and the crushed stone, filters out the water. Am I going on too deep for you? We all good?
Good.
Okay. And then we release it in its natural state towards Concord Gully. The other things I wanted to touch base on is here's our plan and profile of the drive coming in. The drive coming in is what's going to dictate the elevation of the building because we can only go 10% max. And that's going to establish this building height, if you will, or this building ground floor elevation. And that's exactly what happened in this case. The building itself, I'm sorry, CWS design, that's not WRC. Similar as Augusta, as I mentioned, except they had a slope roof in Augusta. Very nice looking building inside and out. The other elevations pretty much mimic that. That's the back side right here, side over there, and this is the front entrance where you'd come into the building. So this is our site inventory plan. What we're showing here are wetlands and 20% slopes. All the area in blue are 20% slopes. The green's the wetlands. Drainage flow arrows. You see these red arrows. That's the direction of all the flow on site. Our site analysis plan. This is a little more intense, if you will. So we've got 5 different items here, actually 6. This is our road. We have to call this a road because we're multifamily within the town. We can't call it a driveway. So we have to have a right-of-way established with that road coming in. The parking is in this magenta or purplish color. The 20% slopes, the wetlands, and of course the stream. And this is our open space. Our open space count came to just about 2.4 acres. And our usable land in this zone is only 4.16 and change. So we had very limited area to do this project, which is where we are today. We're kind of shoehorning this in, but it still has the same area that we need to make this work. And that's pretty much my presentation. I'll take any questions you might have.
I drove down Varney Road today trying to get a sense of things. So the old NET brick structure that's there, that goes away?
No, it's not ours. It's separate ownership.
That's not on your property?
No, not at all. It's that little cutout here.
And so your road in is after you pass that?
It is. It's right after that, which makes the most sense due to the grades. And the sewer line comes right in there too. And I'm sure the sewer department would be happy that we're actually making that paved access for them so they can bring their trucks in and manage that.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Could you talk about where you have retaining walls?
Well, I mentioned right here we have a 2-to-1 slope out back. And we did that so we can try to save these big trees. There's a whole line of trees out back here, and the roots, I'm sure, are huge. What we'd like to do is bring this, I've left 20 feet of flat area, if you will, with a slight slope to pitch away from the building. We'd like to really pull that back, say to the 10-foot mark, if the fire department's good with it.
And where the picnic tables are there, I couldn't tell if that was a
Yeah, the
retaining
picnic
wall
table's
edge,
right
or-
in here.
Is that a retaining wall edge, or does that?
No, there's no other retaining wall, there's no retaining wall on site at all,
Oh, okay.
right now.
In the rendering, it kind of looks like there's this big rocky wall thing that manages the grades, but it's in
He's
the
right here?
application, it's not on
Yeah.
those sheets.
We don't have any retaining walls right now. We really don't intend to put any in unless we have to.
Okay, all right. Well,
And the slope is going into the building?
It is, we're going downhill
Yeah.
towards us. We put a drip edge all the way around the building with a crushed stone in the pipe. That protects the building from any water that might come at it. But everything slopes away from the building gently.
How visible would the building be from
Well,
Main
that's a
Street?
great question right there. I think in our packet, the architect has provided I think it's the last 2 pages. That's what that looks like. It's in the last 2 pages of your packet.
Okay.
And then there's another one from Barney Road right there.
Okay. Go back far enough.
But our thoughts are,
There we go.
we could definitely have more trees there if we could pull that embankment back just a little towards the building. Really don't want to cut those big trees down. That's where I'm heading with this.
yeah, I mean, the trees would be a nice buffer in that area.
Yeah, it'd be a nice natural buffer, if you will. I can go over the utilities if you want me to, anything like that. We have an 8-inch main on Barney Road that we'll connect into. We've talked to Maine Water. We need to bring in separate lines. Maine Water is one of the lone wolves, if you will. Most communities or utility districts now let you come in there and then branch out on your site. Maine Water actually wants 2 separate lines, one for fire suppression, the other one for domestic, which is fine. And I understand when there's a fire, they can shut it down at the street. Makes sense. I've mentioned sewer to you. We have a manhole right in front that we can connect into. Electrical coming off Barney Road to a pole underground into the building.
We'll probably have more questions about utilities after
I'm
the
sure you
sidewalk
will.
and after you get
I'm just
the,
trying to fill you full of stuff that you won't remember anyway.
I've got a question for you.
Sure.
This is affordable and senior housing?
It's 55 and older, affordable housing. Did I say that correctly, Matt?
Thanks.
And it's an identical concept that they did in Augusta. I'll tell you what I'll do is I'll bring some pictures of that to the next meeting, because I'm going to be here a few more times apparently, and show them to you so you can see what that looks like. To give you a good idea of what this will look like.
You mentioned talking with the fire department, just like
So,
trucks coming in and out for
Yeah.
you know,
You wanna go
alarms.
over that
and-
real quick?
Yeah, like vehicle movement.
so
Say it again?
Yes, we should.
we have a dead end here, obviously, so we put this large, and we put the fire truck right on this thing to make sure it works. They can pull in here, back out, and get out of here with this large T-turn, which is why we have basically the sea of pavement at the end, just so the fire truck can get out of there. They'll all be cross-hatched, of course, and say, no parking.
And the sewer line, as it was constructed,
Yeah.
presumably ages ago.
It goes right through here, right in Pierce, actually did a plan and profile, which we found, and it's got all the elevations on it. We still need to pop some lids, but it's generally down there 5 to 8 feet in depth. And we're trying to maintain the same cover over that pipe, if you will, so we don't add any fill and we don't subtract any, just to make sure that it meets frost protection.
Does your pavement design need to take into account vehicular weight as it relates to
Yeah, and it does.
the sewer line?
Yeah, we go with a 4-inch pavement here, if you will, for the parking lot.
Okay, so you're accounting for.
Actually, the same situation was I hate to keep bringing this up, but Augusta had water and sewer, and this across that parking lot as well, a separate line there, separate mains.
Okay, so it sounds like you got that well in hand.
Caroline, isn't there a TIF or there's a project for a walkway? somewhere in that part of town.
They're in section 527. There's a performance standard that you have to connect to abutting properties with a 5-foot pedestrian way with no
No, that's-
specifications.
That's not what I was talking about. I thought that as part of one of Bean's projects, there was a walkway, a trail
Oh,
that was supposed to be connecting
There-
some part of Freeport to another part of Freeport.
yes, there is a TIF with a trail easement. I'm not sure how it directly impacts this property other than potential for connectivity, which I believe the applicant is aware of as an opportunity. But I don't know that the finalized GPS coordinates for the new trail have been determined yet.
Okay.
And again, we're only talking about a portion of this parcel that will be under this applicant's control.
We have had conversations with those people, by the way,
Okay.
just so you know that. We had a Zoom call.
Couple procedural things, if there aren't any other questions right now. Normally, we would consider a motion for concept approval, but when we're likely to have a site walk, we defer it. And-
Sure.
And any input from the board on whether we should have a site walk?
That's a good
I think
idea.
it's a good idea.
Didn't you have a
I like
sidewalk?
that one.
I'm sitting here with my hand up.
I think also to see visibility from Route 1, but also just to walk this way.
And Lynn also has a hand up online.
Lynn, you have a question?
Hi, yes. The elevation you presented us is from the front only. And since you were talking about how many trees in the back you might be taking down, you're not sure yet. I'd love to see this building from above and around the back so that we have a sense of what the impact would be if trees need to be taken down. I mean, are there balconies on the back? I'm only seeing the one dimension right now.
Did you get a copy of the handout, Lynn?
I did.
Last 2 pages?
Oh, it's there. Okay, good. Sorry, I don't have a paper one.
Okay.
And
This is
it
from-
was sent in my thing, but I will look. Okay, thank you.
We're working
I
on
just
digital
see it as part of your
transition challenge right
presentation,
now.
so that would be helpful. And I will get my hands on it. Thank you.
I think the other thing that's important for the board to keep in mind is that we have very specific standards for building appearance in 527. So before we look at this again, or next time, look at that standards with regards to what kind of things you're looking for. I think it has to do visibility from like abutting properties and the road or something like that.
I just want to mention, we also have a multifamily development directly across the street from us on Varney Road, just so everyone knows that.
I mean, regarding the building, I don't know if the architects are here, but it seems like the short end that's facing the road is not the most articulate end, and it's a little jumbled looking.
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Regarding the building and the elevations.
Okay.
The one that you might call the front facade is facing the road is the narrow end of the building.
Yeah.
And it seems to be accommodating mostly like functional parts of the plan layout for the building, meaning like stairways and exits and stuff like
You're
that.
exactly right. I won't lie to you about that.
Yeah, it needs something to
This is
look.
what you'd be seeing
Yeah.
on Varney Road.
Right.
I couldn't agree with you more.
I don't know where the hell.
And this might be something for the site walk, but I know there's a utility building,
I didn't see.
a former utility building in front of this on a separate parcel. Do you know how much that is going to screen this facade from the road?
I can put something together for that.
I think that would be good for the site walk too,
Yeah,
if they decide to do a site walk.
yeah. I mean, it's a fair point that that building's in between and is a setback a bit, so that may,
Yeah, and there's that like, you can see another one, that square right in the middle of it.
right. And then the other question I had regarding the building, so we're aware, is each individual unit going to have its own, split system? And then there are like 40 split systems on the roof that you can then see from Route 1? Like, what's the setup with
I'm
that?
going to let Matt answer that.
The current design is that no, not everybody has their own individual mini split.
Okay,
There'll be one or two that control a centralized system for the corridors and the common areas, and then there'll be individual baseboard electric heat in each apartment.
Okay.
We will have the architect here at one of the next few meetings, just so they can answer anything you want to know about the building. I'm outside the building, I'm not inside it, so
Got it.
I can do the best I can there, but when it comes to inside the building, I'd rather have the professionals talk about that.
Everyone's in agreement that the site walk's okay?
So before you talk about a site walk, I will just remind you that your regularly scheduled board meeting for June is on holiday. So we had switched the June meeting, because we're not open on Juneteenth, to the 26th. So you have a little more time. I think you could schedule it right before the meeting, or you have plenty of time between now and then if you want to schedule it on an alternate day. I mean, you've been doing them at
It works pretty
early
well.
morning.
Does anyone have a problem doing it right before our meeting? 5 o'clock?
On the 26th of June?
Do you think like 45 minutes is enough time for them
Oh, yeah,
to see?
definitely. And that's, what's the date, 6/26, you said?
June, let me see, I believe it's
Yes,
June
26th.
26th. Yep, June 26th at
5 o'clock.
5 o'clock.
Sounds good.
That'd be great for me.
Good, thank you.
Do you have a
I won't be here on the 26th. I've got a conflict. I'll be out of town.
I will be
Will be
here on
here.
the
I thought you
26th.
might when
because
I
thought
reminded
the meeting
that.
was on the week before.
No,
So do we have, we need a quorum to have a site walk, so I have 2, 3, 4,
I have no plans yet.
5.
Lynn?
Okay. Lynn?
I can be there.
Okay, so site walk scheduled for the 5th. We will notify all abutters. The public is welcome to attend. There'll be public notice. And then you still, I don't know, were you going to hear public comment tonight? You have people on
Yeah.
Zoom still? Okay.
site walk at 5 PM.
June 26th, 5
June
o'clock.
26. Any other questions from the board? Any members of the public wish to comment on this? Although it's not a formal public hearing, we welcome input. Yes, sir. Come to the mic, please, and give us your name as well. Address, please.
How do you do? I'm Bob Meyerhofer. I'm curious, I haven't been able to get a good sense of how this is sited. I understand there's 55 acres in this buildable area. You're using 9?
No, there's only 9.23 acres on the whole parcel, only using 4.16.
Okay, so I can't quite get the visual yet. I will come on the site walk. I'm interested in that. And I'm well aware of the woods behind that, which I walk in frequently. My question is how this is sited and how it would abut or the setback for the Concord Brook Condo Association, Harvest Ridge Road, which I've seen on one of the maps, sort of comes into this big rectangle of land I was looking at. But I can't get a sense, if this is sort of sited where the old garage was, Richie de Grandpre's garage, which is on Varney Road.
Next door to that.
It's right sited there. If I was a drone, I could look down and see this. I can't get a sense of the distance of that back towards the Harvest Ridge Road.
Okay.
I'm trying to pull up Google Earth. My computer's just been a little bit slow because I have Zoom running.
Yeah.
They're pretty far apart.
Far apart?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think
It's not.
part of my concern was also I'm well aware of the ledge in there, and the blasting that might be necessary.
If you want to move that easel, you can show them on there.
So I think this is Harvest Ridge Road that ends right here. And I don't know if the development is, okay.
That little rectangle there, that's that NET building.
That's the telecom, and then
Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna be right behind the brewery, if you will. Does that make sense?
I understand now where you're at. I looked at some
Yeah.
maps earlier, and I couldn't get a good sense of it. And am I right to think that would the access to the development that you're planning be off of Varney, or does it come?
that's the Stewart, isn't it?
Okay,
Yeah, right at the sewer easement.
great. I have a much better sense.
If you
Appreciate
need
it.
anything, let me know. I'll give you my card if you wanna see some plans.
Appreciate it.
Yeah,
You can walk right up and take a picture of that if you want to.
here you go, sir. You're welcome.
I'll just note, I saw the plans were of interest. The proposed site plans are on the website, the town's website.
I'm sorry?
The proposed site plans they presented tonight to show the layout and the site features, they're posted on the town's website, freeportmaine.com, if you go to the meeting calendar.
Are there any other questions from the public?
Hi, I'm Brenda Laverdier, and I'm also one of the abutters on Concord Brook Association. And I see in the handout that Concord Gully Stream is described as an urban impaired stream. What does that mean exactly, and how is this going to further impair the stream?
They would have a lower threshold being in the urban impaired watershed for when they need to treat stormwater. They would be able to put less pavement and have to do treatment sooner than somebody outside. And then in this case, they're also keeping setback from that stream.
So it's not going to stop any of the flow to the stream?
They would have to demonstrate that they are not increasing the quantity or quality of water leaving the site as a
Or
result of
decreasing,
the
I'm hoping.
project.
The stream doesn't dry up as a result of the project, too.
Yep.
No, I can answer that for you.
Okay.
So the stream's downhill from us altogether. The urban impaired thing basically brings you to a threshold of 20,000 square feet instead of an acre for having to treat. Well, we're over 20,000, we're at 37 and change, so we have to treat no matter what. And that underdrain soil filter that I explained to you, that pond, that's gonna filter the water out down below, come through some pipes, and then it's gonna bleed it out to the stream. And the quantity's gonna be held up by an outlet control structure, if you will. We'll have orifices, and each one's designed just to hold it there and drain within 24 hours, and it won't let that flush out until the peaks line up, if you will, is what that means in a layman's term.
They'd also have,
Explaining that so
No
clearly.
problem.
they'd also have ongoing maintenance obligations, just like the condo association does with yearly inspections and reporting. And as they go forward, any engineering that they do, we would have peer reviewed by a town's engineer. Yep.
I do have a question in regard to the peer review. Who is doing that now that the engineer's gone?
We typically use Goral Palmer for peer review. We're waiting for clarification from the main DEP if we could use an outside party to do that review on their half, or if applicants are going to have to go through DEP. We have not gotten an answer on that yet.
Okay.
But we will work with you. on
Thank
that.
you.
Yep.
Any other questions from anyone in the room? Anybody on Zoom?
Yeah, you have Kay Sullivan with the hand up on Zoom. Kay, I just brought Kay over.
Let me,
We can hear you, Kay.
okay. I live at 66 Barney Road, which is kind of on the same side of the street as this project, but up over the hill. So I'm in a sense the closest neighbor. I'm concerned about the stream quality, as the person before me just spoke. I'm concerned about the amount of paving that would be part of this project, which instead of rainwater and moisture soaking into the ground is going to create some kind of runoff. And I realize that, you know, the site planners are well aware of all these considerations, but I would like to know more about those kinds of considerations and wondering where I can find more information.
Jim, you want to respond to that?
That's a loaded question. DEP has their standards. They're cut and dry on how they want this treated. DEP in 2006, away from quantity to quality. Most of the towns all kept the quantity, so it made perfect sense. So now you have to do both in tandem, if you will. And really, the only way you can do that is with some kind of a pond. You can't do it with a buffer, because a buffer doesn't contain anything. It'll just let that flow go. So it really has to be a pond with a filter underneath it, or some other device, if you will, all-in-one device in the ground. But you need to store this, and yet you need to remove the contaminants at the same time. That would be my response.
So will the pond blend into the landscape, or are there ways to make that?
The pond's always going to appear to be dry unless it's within 24 hours of the rainfall. It'll hold water for a certain amount of time. You have to have a berm there with a spillway on it for emergency in case the thing wants to blow out on you. If it fills up, all your orifices are plugged, for instance, with debris or whatever. That emergency spillway allows it to go over the top until you can fix that. I think the problem that they have with a lot of these ponds is the 5-year maintenance plan isn't being upkept by most of these applicants. We went out the other day and there were trees growing in these things, and no one had done anything to them. And this was up in Augusta, if you will, a local auto dealer that showed no maintenance whatsoever. And DEP stipulates every 5 years you have to do this maintenance plan, if you will. So they now have to go out there and take care of the thing and rototill up the soil filter, which has been now contaminated, if you will, with all this debris, remove it, put a new filter in. So it costs them a lot more money because they didn't take care of it. I hope that's the answer you're looking for.
Excuse me, I also have a second question.
Okay, one more question, sure.
As someone who comes and goes on Varney Road, I'm kind of well aware of the traffic problem and getting onto Route 1. Making a right-hand turn isn't so bad, but at certain times of the day, making a left-hand turn from Varney Road onto Route 1 is really a problem. And I'm just wondering what measures are going to be taken to mitigate that problem.
Sure. That's a good question. We've hired Sewell Company who did a traffic impact study for the whole project, and what they do with intersections, they rate them at A, B, C, D, or E, or F for levels of service, A being the best, if you will, and F being the worst. The Varney Road intersection, Route 1, is considered an LOS A, if you will, which is, and I'm going to give you guys all, and you ladies, all a copy of this report from Diane Morabito, and it'll show you the accident rates, everything else going on at the intersection of Varney and Route 1, and also on Varney Road. So that has been addressed. I just haven't shared it with you.
And my question is, adding 42 additional units will definitely increase the traffic. So I'm not sure how that will impact the statistics that you have.
It's certain, and that's all taken into account in the report already. Residential uses are by far the lowest impact numbers that you can have when it comes to traffic. When you compare it to retail or a Dunkin' Donuts or a bank or anything like that, this is at the bottom of the totem pole. So these are really the least amount of peak hour trips that you're going to see. That being said, I'd gladly share the report with anyone.
So the board we have subdivision and site plan standards for traffic that we'll have to look at as the project goes on. I will concur with what Jim said, and as you know, because we've reviewed other large multifamily, compared to other uses, even single family, they are a lower generator of traffic, but it's still something we need to look at, the safety in and out of the site and at the nearby intersections.
This process will go on for more than one meeting, and there will be.
I'm well aware of that.
And there will be a formal public hearing as well as comment opportunities at every meeting.
Without question.
Can I just add to that, because I didn't go into that, I think that's a good point. This, right now, would be considered a major subdivision, so they're coming in tonight for an initial conceptual presentation. The board agreed that they're going to hold that site walk on June 26th, which everybody will get. If you got notice tonight, you'll get notice for that, and you can come to that site walk. They would then come back probably on that same night to see if the board's ready to deem the conceptual review process complete. What that really does is the board looks at it and decides, okay, are they protecting and preserving the right areas of the parcel and putting the building in the right area? They would then go away and work on developing the preliminary plans with the initial engineering. They would come back to the board, at which time the board would hold a public hearing. If the board took action on that plan, they then go away, finish all the legal docs, getting all their plans ready. We get the peer reviewed, they get any outside permits, and then they would come back with a fully complete engineered peer reviewed package for final approval. So multi-step process, probably at least 3 more opportunities for the public to come participate in that process, plus the site walk.
Any other questions from anyone on Zoom?
Lynn has a hand up.
Lynn?
Yes, this may be a question for when the architects comes, but you mentioned that the Auburn or Augusta, whatever other development you did, the only difference was that they had a slope roof, and this has a flat roof, and we just had a problem with flat roofs. So I'm curious as to why the change
Sure.
for Freeport.
The Freeport, it's not the zoning ordinance, it is the zoning ordinance, only allows a 35-foot height in that zone. So we have to stay below 35 feet, which is why we're using a flat roof. We'd much rather use a pitched roof, believe me, which would fit better into Freeport's.
Correct.
I'm all with you on that.
Well, I understand by having the flat roof, you can meet the height requirement and get more units in. But as I said, we just went through something and generally people were not in favor of flat roofs.
This parcel was, just FYI for the board, this is one of the parcels that was reviewed, or one of the parts of town that was removed from Design Review District.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Just make one point. Chalmers Hardenberg, 11 Somerset. My point is that the pitched roof is a great question, and I know that Matt and others have talked about if they could pitch it, they'd get solar a lot more easily, a lot more less expensively. So maybe what Jim said is that the town will get through raising the height limits enough so that by the time they're actually in construction, we'll be able to have a pitched roof and solar, and then we won't need, then the baseboard electric can be run off of the solar on the roof. Thank you.
I guess that's no other comments.
No other hands up.
Okay, if there are any other questions from the board, we'll move on to the next item and.
Thank you very much.
Yep, thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Now we have 7 shoreline stabilization items. 2 of them are under the same ownership, so we'll merge those. But the first is Melinda Dyer and William Phillips, 42 McCoy Drive.
So I'll give a generic introduction at the beginning, but then there are some specifications for each. And when you're reviewing 7 of these at one time, a lot of things blur together for both the applicants submitting and the town staff reviewing it. So there are a couple changes I want to make to the draft findings before you. So shoreline stabilization has to come to PRB. Like we saw last month, this is a pocket of Freeport's coastline where we've seen many abutting properties take an impact. So they're all coming forward with riprap, applications for riprap. One of the projects already has riprap, in which case they would be removing the existing and installing new. The heights, as you went through them, you might have noticed vary, I think mostly between 6 and 12 feet, depending on the extent of erosion. We did have our new code officer, Alex, review these, the vegetation. You saw the packets, his memos. He didn't have any issues when they get permits from the code officer. You know, if they're doing stairs or other things under their purview, they'll get permits for that too at such time, but they do require a planting plan, a detailed planting plan kind of shown out, which applicants are aware of. A couple different things you have in the motions tonight. First, Jim, I remember to reference DEP and Army Corps permits. Second, the code officer's been getting feedback that it's not clear to applicants when their approval expires. So even though it's in the ordinance, just to help applicants stay on track and not have things expire, we noted the timing. These shoreline stabilization permits are good for a year. They have a year to get the permit. Then if they do that, they have another timeline to finish it. So that's a new condition that you're gonna start seeing on anything you guys are taking action of. And then the standard condition that they get permits from the code officer. So for the first one at 42 McCoy, there were no changes from what was printed in the staff report with regard to area of riprap, amount of wetland impact, vegetation removal, and replanting.
Tim, you want to give us a quick summary?
Optimum or quick. Good evening, everyone. I'm Tim Forrester with Flycatcher here on behalf of 7 individuals, 7 property owners. I'll summarize it all as one project, and then I guess we can go from there. Maybe that will help be more efficient. But essentially, these all abut one another. There's one parcel, a double piece, the Ballons, which are sort of in between, in the middle of this. And then on the very end, the Dyers have a double parcel, but half of that is already stabilized. So, yeah, we were originally approached by the McManuses, and that's because their situation is probably the most desperate of all of them. It's a very steep slope, and the whole thing is kind of let go from 3/4 of the way up down, and the house is right there at the top of the bank. So we've worked with DEP and the Army Corps to receive essentially emergency approval to carry on this project. So both those agencies are letting us move forward. However, the town doesn't necessarily have those same sets of standards. So we're very hopeful that we can get through tonight and then get approval from the code office and be ready to be on site by the 20th. Essentially, there'll be one construction access that will provide for the whole project. So we're limiting the amount of disturbance on the hillside to get down, and this is in an area where there's already existing riprap that comes down from the top of the slope. So we're really minimizing additional vegetation impact and using an already essentially easy access way to the shore. And then once on the shore, any equipment's going to operate on timber mats. So we'll leapfrog on timber mats to get from one end to the other. And in a couple locations, we're actually going to lower rock down from the top down to the bottom. So the whole goal behind this is to have the least amount of impact on the side slope as possible. We don't want to take down any vegetation that we don't have to. And any vegetation that does need to be removed will be replanted. It's essentially those trees at the bottom of the slope that are already in jeopardy. You know, there's some trees that have just crept down and they're sitting on the beach right now and sort of halfway on their way out anyway. But we still tally those as an impact, and we'll replant above those with new species. There's also an archaeological site here. So we're working with State Historic Preservation, Dr. Spies, and we do have an archaeologist that will be on site to monitor and look for any artifacts when we're in a specific area, which I will not disclose, because that's what they do with archaeological sites. They tell you they're there, but they don't give you the gory details. So I guess that's the short story. Happy to take any questions.
Just to clarify, so you'll get your equipment down and you're going to do all 7 of these properties in one
Correct.
project?
Yep.
Same construction firm, same deal?
Yes. Yep. We have one construction firm that'll do the whole project. You know, starting on the Lloyd property, that one already has riprap there, but it's large rock at the bottom and it's really small rock at the top. So the big storm kind of pushed that around, and it's just inadequate. So we're going to dismantle the whole thing and rebuild it in the same footprint, but with larger stones. And then the material we take out of there, we can utilize elsewhere on the project as backfill.
Great.
Any other questions from the board?
You mentioned that the trees that are being removed are being replanted. There will be replanting. Is that being replanted with trees or
Yes.
with different vegetation?
There's both. It's common practice on these that anytime we set the riprap in place, that we try to plant a vegetative buffer directly above it. Typically, you'll do like a creeping juniper. That'll go right above the riprap itself, and that helps cascade over the rock and hide it. So from the water side, you see less rock on the shore. And then bayberry is another very common species along the coast. It has a good root structure. And then any trees that we take out, there's some white birch, some white oak that are scattered throughout each parcel. We tallied them up, but those will go in at least 2 to 1, at least a 1-to-1 ratio. But like I said, most of them are kind of halfway lying on the ground anyway, but we account for them.
I just want to ask Tim a question because I actually find it fascinating. And if we're going to look at so many of these on a regular month, we have to find things fascinating. Have you explained to the board, I found it really interesting. I noticed that your drawings are showing more it seems like you're bringing in more plantings at the top of the bank, and definitely more than what's required, but you have a reason for doing that. And so I'd love just to hear you just kind of explain that.
Yeah, it depends on the project, but in general, one of the problems with the shoreline erosion is, from the top of the house, you have the roof pitch, you have lawn areas, you have developed areas, and that sheet flow comes off the roof, off the structures, and the lawn gets right to the edge and just kicks over the edge. So that tends to exacerbate the top edge of what gets eroded. So we try to promote and encourage property owners to put in vegetative buffers at the top of the slope, as well as disturbed areas down at the bottom. It's not a requirement yet, but personally, it probably ought to be. I think if people are stabilizing their shorelines, they should take every effort to do what's going to improve the scenario.
Is there a standard for the type of rock that's used for the stabilization?
The only requirement is on the state level, where they define riprap as large angular, like blasted quarry stone. That is what it's supposed to be. You'll see different shapes and forms, but in general, it's supposed to be large, irregular rock. And the idea behind that is, and put in on a slope. So in this case, there's either ledge or sort of sandy substrate. So if it's ledge, you could pin those rocks right into the ledge. If it's other substrates, you dig a little trench and bury that large stone to half its diameter. So we're talking stones that are, 4,000 pounds. These are big rocks.
And is that, I think of riprap as being something that's not too big, but you've got 2 to 4 foot diameter. Is that still technically riprap, or?
It is, yeah. There's just different size classes of riprap. Okay. Yeah.
And is there like a density to the placement when they go to position what seems to be like an underlayer and then the wear layer on top? I'm just wondering if there's a consistency to the way that this work should be done that we should be aware of too.
Yeah, so there are different contractors that go about it different ways. And in my opinion, and the way that we've always done it is, you have those large irregular rocks, but in behind it, you're laying in some filter fabric, and then you're putting in a smaller crushed stone to fill those interstitial spaces. But then you have the large stuff on the outside, and that's there to break up any wave action, disperse waves, and little voids and cavities in there are perfectly acceptable.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Any questions from the public? Is there a motion?
We doing them one at a time or all together?
We have to do them one at a time.
Okay. I'll do the first one.
Okay.
Okay, then we go down the row here. Okay. And this is the Dyer Phillips, right? I just want to read the right one.
This is the Dyer Phillips.
Proposed motion, be it ordered that the Freeport Project Review Board approve a shoreline zoning permit for Tim Forrester Flycatcher LLC on behalf of Melinda Dyer and William Phillips for a shoreline stabilization project at a residential property at Tax Assessor Map 5, Lot 76 ETC, parentheses 42 Marquardt Drive, to be built substantially as proposed in an application dated 4/1/24 finding that it meets the standards of Section 306 and Section 404 of the Town of Freeport Shoreline Zoning Ordinance with the following conditions of approval. Number one, this approval incorporates by reference all supporting plans that amend the previously approved plans submitted by the applicant and their representatives at project review board meetings and hearings on the subject application to the extent that they are not in conflict with other stated conditions. Two, this approval shall expire 1 year from the date of issuance if substantial start is not made in construction or in the use of the property during that period. If substantial start is made within 1 year of the issuance of the permit, the applicant shall have 1 additional year to complete the project, at which time the permit shall expire. Number 3, prior to the start of any site work for the project, the applicant obtain any applicable permits to the Freeport Codes Enforcement Officer. 4, the applicant obtain any applicable permits from the Maine Department of Environmental Protection and the Army Corps of Engineers.
Second. Okay, any discussion before we have a roll call vote? Roll call vote. Berger.
Yes?
Donahue.
Yes.
Lynn Hamlin.
Yes.
Madeira.
Yes.
Monteleone.
Yes.
Reiki, yes. Bianchi.
Yes. A question, can we at least just read the first paragraph and say conditions if all the conditions are the same?
Sure.
Oh, man, I never thought you'd agree to that. Nice work. From now on, you're our chief negotiator from now
Only
on.
because Todd asked. No, the last time we did, because these are all very standard and
Okay.
routine, not.
I'm sorry, you all.
That motion passes.
You might, although I do say that, but you might need to tweak the next one, Todd.
I will take the next one on that, because somebody else is going to get it down to one sentence.
So,
Yeah.
can I jump into the next one?
What are you going to say?
So the next one, there's going to need to be a change. So,
So now he got it. See?
so you got approval, but now you're gonna have to read it, Todd. There were 2 applications for McManus, which he referenced earlier, one for 46 and one for 48. Had I talked to him before they dropped him off, I would have said, hey, bring one application, they're abutting and they're under the same ownership, but he was too quick. So we brought 2, but then reviewing them, it was confusing, which is why you got that, just one plan sheet today that shows them together. So they're here as one for you to take action on. We do need to note one change. We just need to clarify that for the application for 46 and 48, there's only 1 tree proposed for removal. So in finding N, Q, T, and in the chapter 65, section 404, finding at the end, all references to 2 trees should be changed to 1 tree. Sharon, did you get that? I did. Okay.
For both lots or just one?
Yep, you have 1 set of findings and 1 motion for both lots.
Okay.
So I think if somebody wanted to make an abbreviated motion that you were going to move to order that the board approve this, you could note as presented or as printed and with the changes to the findings as outlined at the meeting or something like that. You still do have people online too, if you want to, if you're taking public comment.
Yes, so, and you have anything to add to this one, to McManus? Are there any questions from the board relative to the 2 McManus applications? Anyone on Zoom have a comment?
No hands.
Is there a motion?
I'll take a crack at it. Let's see. Be it ordered that the Freeport Project Review Board approves a shoreline zoning permit for Tim Forrester Flycatcher LLC on behalf of Amy and Stacy McManus for a shoreline stabilization project at a residential property at tax assessor maps 5 lots 74 and 74A, 46 and 48 McCoy Drive to be built substantially as proposed in the application dated April 1st, 2024, finding that it meets the standards of Section 306 and Section 404 of the Town of Freeport Shoreline Stabilization Ordinance, with the conditions that were previously approved, and let's see, also need to, with changes to the findings to reflect 2 trees rather than 1.
One tree.
One tree rather than 2 trees.
Before you second that, I just want to note these conditions as proposed, not previously approved.
These conditions as proposed, as printed. Okay.
Is there a second?
Second?
Any discussion? Any public comment? Roll call vote. Berger.
Yes?
Donahue.
Yep.
Hamlin.
Yes.
Madeira.
Yes.
Monteleone.
Yes.
Reiki, yes. Yankee.
Yes.
That motion passes. The next item is Patricia and Alan Craig, 52 McCoy Drive.
So I just want to note that this should just be in the name of Patricia Craig. Unfortunately, Alan has passed away. So Patricia is the owner of the property. There's one change to the narrative here. The narrative and the table outlining the plantings were a little bit different. So the list of plantings should include red oak, juniper, bayberry, and Virginia rose. They will not be planting white birch or beech plum as part of the revegetation. And that list of plantings will need to be updated in the proposed findings. N, Q, T in the finding for section 404. Again, that's just striking the white birch and beech plum and adding Virginia rose to the list of plant species.
Are there any questions? Is there a motion? I'll make a motion. Be it ordered that the Freeport Project Review Board approve the shoreland zoning permit for Tim Forrester Flycatcher LLC on behalf of Patricia Craig for a shoreline stabilization project at a residential property at Tax Assessor Map 5, Lot 73, 52 McCoy Drive, to be built substantially as proposed in application dated 4/1/24, finding that it meets the standards of Section 306 and Section 404 of the Town of Freeport Shoreland Zoning Ordinance with the conditions as written in the staff report and with the changes to the findings as reflected in the record. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call vote. Berger.
Yes?
Donahue.
Yes.
Hamlin.
Yes.
Madeira.
Yes.
Monteleone.
Yes.
Reiki, yes. Yankee.
Yes.
Next item is Geraldine Kerr, 54 McCoy Drive. Tim, do you have anything else to add to that application?
The only thing I'll add is that the letter of authorization for this one, we had, Mr. Kerr had signed the letter. However, the parcel is owned solely by Geraldine, so we did correct that and submit a updated authorization letter on behalf of the applicant.
That came into. It's more of an FYI, this is all in Geraldine's.
And the motion states that correctly, if anyone. Any comments from the board, questions? Anything from the public? Is there a motion?
I'll read it. Be it ordered that the Freeport Project Review Board approve a shoreland zoning permit for Tim Forrester Flycatcher LLC on behalf of Geraldine Kerr for a shoreline stabilization project at a residential property at Tax Assessor Map Lot 5, Lot 72, 54 McCoy Drive, to be built substantially as proposed in the application dated 04/01/24, finding that it meets the standards of Sections 306 and Section 404 of the Town of Freeport Shoreland Zoning Ordinance with the following conditions of approval as printed.
Is there a second?
Second?
Is there any discussion by the board? Roll call vote. Berger.
Yes?
Donahue.
Yes.
Hamlin.
Yes.
Madeira.
Yes.
Monteleone.
Yes.
Reiki, yes. Yankee.
Yes.
Next to last of these is Eric and Diane Emerton, 60 McCoy Drive. Tim, do you have anything to add to that application? Any discussion or question by the board? Any discussion or question by the public? Is there a motion?
Sure, I'll do this one. Be it ordered that the Freeport Project Review Board approve a shoreline zoning permit for Tim Forrester, Flycatcher LLC, on behalf of Eric and Diane Emerton for a shoreline stabilization project at a residential property at Tax Assessor Map 5, Lot 69, 60 McCoy Drive, to be built substantially as proposed in an application dated April 1st, 2024, finding that it meets the standards of Section 306 and Section 404 of the Town of Freeport Shoreland Zoning Ordinance with the conditions as printed.
Is there a second?
Second,
Any discussion by the board? Roll call vote. Berger.
yes?
Donahue.
Yes.
Hamlin.
Yes,
Madeira.
Yes.
Monteleone.
Yes.
Radke, yes. Yankee.
Yes.
The last item is Shoreland Stabilization Permit of Lucy and McAllister Lloyd, 62 McCoy Drive. Anything to add to that, Tim? Is there a motion? Or is there any discussion? Is there a motion? I'll make a motion. Be it ordered that the Freeport Project Review Board approve the shoreline zoning permit for Tim Forrester Flycatcher LLC on behalf of Lucy and McAllister Lloyd for a shoreline stabilization project at residential property at Tax Assessor Map 5, Lot 68, which is 62 McCoy Drive, to be built substantially as proposed in an application dated April 1, 24, finding it meets the standards of Section 306 and Section 404 of the Town of Freeport Shoreline Zoning Ordinance with the following conditions of approval as stated in the staff report. Is there a second?
Second?
Any discussion by the board? Roll call vote. Berger.
Yes?
Donahue.
Yes.
Hamlin.
yes.
Madeira.
Yes.
Monteleone.
Yes.
Radke, yes. Yankee.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you all very much, and thank you, Caroline, for all your work.
Thank you.
You want to do that?
Yeah, so the last item on the agenda, the state statute changed back in 2018, and there's a provision written in there that it allows municipalities, when a structure is divided into 3 or more units, whether it be by sale, lease, development, et cetera, which would normally be subject to subdivision, that the municipality, being the planning board, could make a finding that we have site plan review criteria in place to identify some identified standards by the state, and that we feel those are adequate. So basically, it would allow multifamily housing projects in one structure to not go through subdivision and only go through site plan. That would also apply to affordable housing developments in one structure. And so what the state requires is a finding that we have a site plan ordinance in place, and it has adequate criteria in regards to stormwater management, sewage disposal, water supply, and vehicular access. And we could also include other standards like environmental layout, appearance, and safety. So the planning board is looking at subdivision and site plan, and specifically those standards and others, to see if the planning board wants to make this finding, which would change the process that multifamily dwellings in a singular building go through in Freeport. They specifically asked for feedback from the project review board. They are formulating draft language right now. They had discussions. They talked high level about financial capacity. We kind of noted that Freeport's unique in that we don't have private road standards. So I know I would have concerns if people started creating private roads with no standards. So that might be something that they want to look at. It's not on one of those listed standards by the state, but it's still an important standard. And then they're looking at their criteria for sewage, water supply, vehicular access, and stormwater management. So they wanted to know if there was any thoughts the project review board had on things they should consider or be aware of, or if they feel like any of those standards for site plan might be inadequate if they were going to exempt these projects from subdivision. This would be kind of an initial ask. We are getting a little bogged down with planning board projects due to some ordinance stuff we have ahead of this. We were hoping to get this back to them in June. I think that's unlikely. They would probably have it back in July, in which case I would probably have some draft language, and we could talk about it again in another meeting. But as we work on language, would welcome feedback from this board. A lot of other municipalities have done this already, as you kind of were made aware, when we've had some multifamily housing projects come in downtown, and they've had to go through subdivision here, and they don't in other towns, and it's because other towns have made this finding.
I'll just add that it's very redundant to have to put an applicant through both subdivision and site plan review, and the only criteria that I'm aware of that we don't cover on site plan, that we do cover in subdivision is, as you said, the financial capacity and technical capacity. If we can get that built in somehow, then it's completely redundant.
Yeah, one of the other things they did talk about is you guys don't have a site plan, I'm sorry, a public hearing requirement in site plan. You have an optional provision. But usually when you guys have held a public hearing, it's because you've had a subdivision or because you've had design review of a large enough scale that ordinance. So I think something they were looking at is that if you were going to do multifamily, you require a public hearing, which really, we aligned the abutter notification for PRB site plan and subdivision, so they're both 500 feet, but that public hearing really requires an ad in a paper, that additional step. So I know that was something, it would condense the process, major subdivisions such as you saw tonight, you have 3-step process. And then a site plan, you could really be looking at, 2 meetings. And so they talked a little bit about that. But I welcome other comments, and we'll keep sharing it with you. If the timing doesn't work to share it with you and keep it on track with the planning board, then we would invite you to come to the planning board meeting and share your thoughts there.
So I agree with eliminating redundancy as being great. I just noticed that, or noted that in the subdivision review on fire protection, there's very specific items that need to be passed in order to approve. And then in the site plan, it's very vague in terms of the requirement as it relates to fire protection. So it'd be nice to have the language come over so there's a consistency as it relates to fire protection for this kind of dwelling.
That's a good point. Let me look at it, because we also now have a fire protection ordinance that's come into play, and now we're kind of relying on that. So let me look and see. Yes, great point. Let me look at that.
The multi-unit building code would address some of those standards separately, right?
Yeah, it's going to require sprinklers.
It'll kind of define where, higher levels of fire control are required. So some of that might be redundant.
Redundant on redundant.
Exactly, yeah.
I still think it's a good thing to flag to have that, the fire chief, but you're right, the building code might kick in before our own requirements would there, yep.
And then the other one was the sidewalk and bike lanes, specifically in the Freeport Village Overlay District. It's kind of vague on site plan, but the subdivision's a little more detailed. It's a minor nit, and certainly not worth having somebody go through both, but if we're going to do this right, let's do it right.
The Freeport Village Overlay District, I think those are standards we're going to look at, because part of the design review overhaul is getting one version and then you're getting kind of an analysis of what's left and what we should do with those standards. I'm not sure, the Freeport Village Overlay District, you always have to go to that table and see what standards apply where. I can't remember what districts the sidewalk and bike lanes, but yep, we'll add that to the list of things to look at. I think it can be looked at pretty easily.
And does the site plan review get us the ability to require paved access roads for the development, or?
No, not, I don't think it has a paved. You definitely would have to have a paved apron. So that's why, I can't remember where the planning board landed, because I wasn't the one leading the conversation, but I had concerns that if they were gonna put in a new private road, that they would probably be best to stay in subdivision, because the town of Freeport historically does not accept new roads, and we have pavement, and we have width, and we have all those other things. Let me look at that. I mean,
So road
we
as opposed to
have,
driveway.
yeah, no, we must not, other than the apron, because we have dirt parking lots. We have dirt parking lots and driveways, like New Meadows Marina. I mean, I'd be surprised if a multifamily wanted to do that, but if we don't require it, they could definitely
Right.
do gravel, which could be maintenance for whoever owns it in the future. So you feel like that's just something they should look at, or something they should consider requiring, or?
We should define a threshold.
I agree.
There's a difference between a 3-unit and a 47-unit.
Yeah.
And so if we can set that threshold
Yeah.
right, then I think we can be both flexible but also realistic.
That's a good point, too. So multifamily would be 3 or more units. So you could have a variety. I think they are not looking at regulating the in and out of site plan or subdivision based upon the number of units. I feel like if they wanted to go down that avenue, that it'd be best to somehow tweak major and minor definitions to change that process. But they could look at adding a performance standard for multi-unit parking and driveway for a certain number of parking spaces.
I think the broad takeaway is that this generally seems like a really good idea and really efficient, but would require kind of a thoughtful review of the site plan ordinance, just to make sure that all of those key elements have something there to fold in.
I've talked to the planning board chair. I think they are breaking it down carefully.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I like that everyone's called out different things. It's great.
Anything else?
So it's fair to say you're generally supportive, but would encourage them to have some consideration of these items, which would be a threshold for paved parking and driveways. We like eliminating redundancy, a look at fire protection, and a look at requirement for sidewalk and bike lanes in the FEOD. Is anything? Okay, so you'll probably see that on your agenda at minimum with an update at the next meeting. If we have language, then I would send it to you beforehand and welcome feedback on it.
Great. The town manager is with us. Would you like to address us? How'd we do tonight? Is there a motion to adjourn?
Pay raise, is that what that is?
So moved.
We'll let you go out.
Is there a second? All in favor? No.
Yes?
Oh, good. We don't have to do a roll call vote. Night, every night, Lynn.
Night, thank you. Caroline is a steel trap. She knows her stuff, but she just accepted